Welcome to Bill Russo's Short Story Theatre. Today, we go back in time and place. The time is the 1950s and the place is Leftover, Maine, on Cape Cod. Leftover, Maine is that forgotten section at the end of Main Street in Hyannis, the unofficial capital of Cape Cod. Leftover, Maine is at the far end of busy Main Street. It is a place where the tourists never go. It's home to seedy pawn shops, dusty thrift stores, the West Elm Hotel where rooms rent for 50 cents by the hour, the Akimbo Billiard Academy with its 6 pool tables, and it is also the office of Gable Stone, services rendered. The Cape Cod police don't usually bother with Leftover, Maine, and Gable Stone is the closest thing to law on Leftover, Maine. But in today's story, Gable Stone does not solve the crime or apprehend the crooks. The hero of this story is the most unlikely individual in the area. He's also the man who gives us the title of this episode. Today's play is The Chicken Man of Leftover, Maine. Leftover, Maine is a stretch of road that occupies about 1/4 mile at the far end of Main Street, before it turns into Route 28, leading into the town of Yarmouth. On one side of Leftover, Maine is the ocean, Nantucket Sound. But there are few sandy beaches on Leftover, Maine. Sharp, jagged rocks cover most of the shoreline, with just a few secluded sandy areas, not big enough to attract the tourists. On the other side of Leftover, Maine, is a ragged collection of buildings that house the 1,000 or so inhabitants of Leftover, Maine. They live in cheap hotels, shabby tenements, in cramped apartments above the shops, or in rumpled shacks in the alleys behind Leftover, Maine. The Chicken Man lives in one of those rickety shacks. The Chicken Man has a name, of course. But nobody knows it. To all of Leftover, Maine, he is simply the Chicken Man.
Behind the Chicken Man's crowded cottage are a series of coops containing 200 chickens. At dawn, every morning, the Chicken Man collects the eggs from these chickens and sells them along Leftover, Maine. He has an old Schwinn bicycle with one basket tied to the front handlebars and twin baskets attached to his rear wheel. He fills the baskets with eggs, packed by the dozens. Then he heads to the Sunny Side Up diner, which usually buys 3 or 4 dozen eggs. Next he pedals to the street's other breakfast diner, the Good Mornin' Cafe. The Good Mornin' is not as busy as the Sunny Side Up, so they usually buy just 2 dozen eggs. After that, the Chicken Man knocks on the doors of the families that live in the tenements. Some of them buy 2 or 3 eggs, some buy 4 or 5 eggs. A few of them buy a whole dozen. After he makes the rounds of the tenements, the Chicken Man wheels over to the alleys behind Leftover, Maine, and sells the last couple dozen of his eggs to the people who live in the shacks. He stays on the job until he sells all but 2 or 3 eggs. Those he keeps for his own breakfast. The rest of the Chicken Man's day is spent tending his flock. He loves the chickens. In fact, he likes them a little too much. He's soft-hearted. Chickens generally stop laying eggs when they reach the age of 5 or 6. But they can live another 2 or 3 years after they stop laying. Most chicken owners kill off the hens that stop laying, but not the Chicken Man. He allows each and every hen a full and happy retirement once its laying days are over. That means that on average, about 30 of his 200 chickens are on retirement and they do not generate any income. But they still have to be fed, and the Chicken Man feeds his flock a variety of good foods. The staple, of course, is a packaged food called layer hen crumbles, which comes in 50-pound bags. He supplements that with food from his kitchen, including spaghetti, which surprisingly the chickens love. He cooks up 10 or 20 pounds of spaghetti at a time, and when cooled, he spreads it all around the chicken run, and the birds go at it like little kids on Christmas morning, searching for presents under the tree. Being a Chicken Man is not an easy job. It requires a great deal of work, keeping the coops clean, rising at dawn to gather the eggs, and then riding a bicycle all around Leftover, Maine, until all the eggs are sold, except for the 2 or 3 he saves for his own breakfast. This usually means that by 7 or 8 o'clock at night, 8:30 at the latest, the Chicken Man is sound asleep. and he will sleep until first light, at which time he will begin the daily collection of the eggs. One night at the end of summer, in 1953, the chicken man's sleep was disturbed. He heard a scuffle in the chicken coop. A chicken was crying out in alarm. At first he was concerned, but then he said to himself that it's probably just the old red rooster pushing his weight around. He loves to boss those poor hens. The chicken man said he was too tired to go out there and yell at the old red rooster. So the chicken man went back to sleep. But at sunrise, when he went out to gather eggs, he noticed that the swinging door of the coop was wide open and dozens of chickens had left the enclosure and were wandering through the grass and pecking at the ground in search for insects or anything else they could find that they liked to eat.
Well, it sure looks like somebody broke in last night. I'm going to put a lock on that gate today. Right now, I better make a count and see how many chickens I'm missing.
After rounding up all his flock and getting the rooster and all the hens back into the coops, the chicken man counted all his chickens and noted that 12 chickens were missing. The next day, the chicken man went through his usual routine. He pedaled his bike from one end of leftover Maine to the other, selling all his eggs but 3. Those 3 were part of his breakfast, supplemented with ham, fried potatoes, and 3 slices of buttered toast, which was washed down with decaf coffee. He usually drank regular coffee, but on this day, he wanted decaf coffee because he planned to sleep all day. He would spend the night in the chicken coop with his flock. And if the chicken bandits return, he will have his gun ready and shoot them down if he has to. He sold the last of his eggs around 10 in the morning and returned home. After checking the lock on the gate and feeding the chickens, he went into his house and quickly fell asleep, not waking until about 8 at night, which was the time he usually went to bed. The chicken man grabbed a blanket from his bed and went outside to the chicken coop. He unlocked the gate and decided to leave it unlocked because he didn't want the chicken thieves to realize that he was onto them. He spread out his blanket on the ground inside the coop and waited. 9 o'clock came and went. It was all quiet. 10 o'clock saw no change. It was all quiet. But at 11 o'clock, he heard the gate being opened. And then, he heard footsteps. They were coming closer to the coop where he lay in hiding. It sounded as though there were 2 people entering the coop. The chicken man waited until he was sure that the intruders were no more than 6 feet from where he lay in hiding. Then he hit a switch. Instantly, the coop was flooded with a bright light that revealed 2 ragged hobos in the process of grabbing chickens.
Put down them chickens and raise your hands. You see this gun that I'm holding? If you make one false move, I'll shoot you. Not to kill, but just to cripple you. First, you're gonna get one in the leg. Then one in the arm. Then just for fun, I'm gonna take out your kneecaps, both of them.
The terrified chicken robbers quickly released the birds they had been holding and dropped face down on the ground, as they were instructed to by the chicken man. From a roll of chicken wire, leaning against one corner of the coop, the chicken man unreeled long sections of the fencing and tightly wrapped up the 2 burglars. When they were properly trussed up, he rolled them, one at a time, from the alley to leftover Maine, in front of the downtown Tap, the street's most popular bar. The 2 figures, tightly wrapped up in chicken wire, were protesting loudly. They were so loud that Gable Stone heard them from a window in his office, which was a few doors down the street. Gabe left his office and headed for the downtown tap. Arms Akimbo, the one-armed owner of the Akimbo Billiard Academy, had also heard the ruckus, and he was talking to the Chicken Man.
Hello, Arms. Hello, Chicken Man. I heard these two guys howling. I take it you've had some robbers at the coop, and before they flew the coop, you wrapped them all up.
Hi, Gabe. The Chicken Man told me the whole story. These guys have been stealing his chickens, and he laid a trap for them tonight, and captured them.
Good job, Chicken Man. Did you call the police?
Gabe, the Chicken Man told me that he has not called the police.
Why not, Arms? Why hasn't he contacted them?
Gabe, are you forgetting that this is leftover Maine? Nobody cares what happens here. If there's trouble in the Kennedy compound in Hyannisport, how long do you think it would take the cops to get there?
Well, Arms, I'd say that if the Kennedy compound called the cops, it would take about 2 seconds for the police to get there.
Correct, Gabe. And if a business on busy Main Street had a robbery, how long would it take for the cops to get there?
About 2 minutes.
That's right, Gabe. And how long would it take for the cops to come if there's trouble on leftover Maine?
About 2 or 3 hours, if they come at all.
Correct again, Gabe. You know better than anybody. You're the closest thing we have to a lawman, here on leftover Maine. That's why the Chicken Man rolled the robbers to the front of the downtown tap. He knew that you would hear them raising a ruckus and come out to find out what's happening.
Arms, before I left my office I put in a direct call to the chief. And I called in a few favors to get a faster than usual response. He told me that he will have a car here, in less than 5 minutes.
Well, Gabe, if that happens, it will be a new record.
Arms, they will be here. In the meantime, congratulations, Chicken Man. You did a great job capturing these 2 crooks. There's just one thing I want to know. How did you manage to capture them? It was 2 against 1 and they looked much bigger than you.
We will tell you, mister. He was going to shoot us in the kneecaps, and shoot us in the arms, and shoot us in the legs. He should be arrested instead of us. All we were going to do was steal a couple chickens. He was going to shoot us just for that.
Well, the police are on the way. They will be here any minute, so you guys don't have to worry about getting shot. But I suspect you're going to spend some time behind bars.
I'm Sergeant Joseph Friday, Cape Cod Police. Mr. Chicken Man, I'm told you threatened to shoot these suspects. Do you have a permit for the gun you used to threaten the suspects?
Nope. Officer, I don't have a gun permit.
Well, Mr. Chicken Man, I'm afraid that you're going to be in a little trouble for threatening them with a gun that you don't have a permit for. Show me the gun.
Why, certainly, Sergeant Friday. I'll show you the gun. Here it is.
Hey, don't point that gun at me! Drop that weapon! Wait a minute. That's just your finger pointed at me, with your thumb up. That's what little kids do when playing cops and robbers.
Yep, that's my gun. I stuck my pointer finger straight out with my thumb straight up. And that's what I was gonna shoot 'em with.
And those 2 chicken thieves thought it was a real gun.
Yep, Officer Friday, that's what it was. It was the power of imagination, don't you know? They are robbers. Both of them are carrying guns. You can check it out. They're both carrying guns. And when I threatened to shoot them, and I pointed my finger at them, they imagined I had a gun. And they thought I had the drop on them. They saw gray metal, not a stubby finger. Sometimes the power of imagination is infinite. This was one of those times.
Well, that's the end of our little tale from leftover Maine in Hyannis back in the 1950s, and we swear that this is a true story, and that the names were not changed to protect the innocent. You don't believe me, do you? Well, if you believe that a little boy named David, armed with only a slingshot, could kill a heavily armed, giant warrior, with full battle gear, you certainly should be able to believe that a Cape Cod chicken man could defeat 2 crooks trying to steal his egg producers. It was imagination. And sometimes imagination is more powerful than reality. You've been listening to Short Story Theatre. Today's story was written and directed by our producer Bill Russo. Short Story Theatre is available on all podcast sites from Apple to Zebra and every one in between. Many of our shows are also on the Bill Russo YouTube channel. Thanks for being with us, and please come back again soon. Won't you?